Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Ricardo Jose Gonzalez-Rothi, author of the Mango Chronicle. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here, Terry, and I'm glad to be here with your audience as well.
I am super excited to have you. I really enjoyed the book. But before we get started, why don't you give me a quick little insight into what people are going to find when they read your book?
Well, first of all, people are going to find that the way I wrote the book was in very small chapters that are very easily digestible, and that if you want to read them before bedtime at night, you don't have to reread the prior chapter the next day.
Exactly, right.
There are little vignettes. I guess a bullet summary of it, people might not know what to expect. It's really a story about a kid whose Cuban Huck Finn childhood out of nowhere gets upended by a nuclear crisis. And eventually he ends up having to leave the country with his family as refugees and ends up in blue-collar New Jersey. Not to a very welcome crowd, I should say.
Right.
And he feels nostalgia and tries to do the best he can in the new surroundings. Ends up trying to be a good American in his newly adopted country, and then over the years reflects back on the mango tree of his childhood, which his best buddy and he used to play on.
Right. So that is the title, the Mango Chronicle. And I want to talk with you about titles. I hate them. I have the hardest time. Like, how do you pick? How do you take a novel or a memoir and boil it down to, 1 to 5 words? How difficult was it for you? Or did it just come to you very quickly?
It's funny you should ask that, because I didn't really get into writing this book until the title just came to me.
The title came first.
Well, after much, okay, I mull things over, okay?
Yes.
And I was in academic medicine for many years and led a very busy life, and always wanted to write, but never really had the time. And one day I bit the bullet and took a night community college creative writing course.
Mm-hmm.
And the fellow that ran it was just an incredible human being. And, he said, well, why don't you write down a few sentences, which we all know is kind of a writing prompt. And I did. And I wrote a couple of things, and he said, you did a good job. Why don't you submit this? And then I submitted a few other narratives, never thinking that I would write a book. As I started to think about it, people had read the narratives that I had published and said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I went on mulling in a busy clinician schedule, and I thought about my childhood and the mango tree that I just saw. I loved mangoes. Okay, I love mangoes. There's two kinds of people in the world: people who love mangoes and people who don't care for mangoes. Just people who like spiders, people who don't.
Right.
And when I thought about the mango tree, it really became a metaphor for me, because it's a beautiful tree. It's got foliage. It lasts for years. I mean, there are some mango trees that are 300 years old. And for me, it really represented something that reflected beauty,
Mm-hmm.
reflected good tastes and good memories, and the nostalgia of my childhood. And then I thought, well, what the heck? And then I said, well, I'll just chronicle these little pieces that I've written. And that's when the arc and the metaphor. Yeah. But I agree with you. It's very hard to come up with titles.
I don't know. My very first book that came out was Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. And I thought that it would eventually come out as You Name It by Terry M. Brown. I mean, I couldn't come up with anything. It was really crazy. Something that really struck me, and I don't know if other people will feel this or not, but in my mind, I have an idea of what it would be like to grow up in a communist country. and it's not good, and it's all horrible and difficult, and your childhood didn't feel that way. And as I was reading that, I kept thinking, it's not that things weren't going on. It's just that as a child, you were rather unaware of it.
Well, it's interesting. I should clarify because, I was born in 1950. So Castro didn't come on until 1959. Okay.
Right.
So during my life, I had a sort of happy-go-lucky childhood. I didn't know anything about politics, but I do know that politics did affect my family because
Right.
Batista was an incredible dictator and people were suffering in Cuba. And so I had friends who didn't have much to eat. I lived in a barrio. My mother was a teacher and she couldn't teach in the city. She had to go out of the city to teach because the only way you got a job was you paid off some politician who then got you a job. So I wasn't, during those formative first 9 years or 10 years of my life, I really was I was a very precocious kid, extremely precocious and very observant.
You tell such great stories. There's the kite flying. There was the running from the big pig that tried to gore you, right? There was, you guys, you were shooting with slingshots, and you stole a raft and went out into the middle of the bay, and all of these things that were very much like my childhood. Like I didn't do those things, but similar things, where my brother and I took what was supposed to be a wading pool and put it in a little creek and floated several miles down the creek in this wading pool. So the same kinds of, not exactly, but the same kinds of things. And it really got me to thinking how a lot of times as children, before we really understand all that's going on around us, we just kind of enjoy our childhoods.
We sure do.
Yeah. And you had a really great one. I was very struck by that.
I think it's fascinating that you mentioned that because people who have read my book say, I didn't really grow up where you grew up, but I had similar things that I did.
Yeah.
And truth be told, I didn't set out this book to write about communism or anything political because my family was never political and I was not a political person. But I wanted to be able to reflect back, for all the years that I was busy as a physician, there were things that my family didn't know about me and would never know about me. So I wanted to write about my childhood. And I was very deliberate. The first half of the book, as you know, is written in really what I was trying to do, have a narrative voice of what a 6 or 7 year old kid would be.
Right. And it was fabulous. And I loved it. And I was very sad when that part ended. It was kind of like, I was having so much fun.
Well, so was I, but I was on the other side of the ocean in New Jersey and being bullied and
so let's move to that. So you come to the United States, you speak no English or little English. Did you have any English when you got here?
Where did you live and what is your name? That was it.
That was it. So very little English. And you were placed immediately into a classroom as though you should just fit in. It's not like they were giving you English lessons. You didn't have English as a second language classes and other things. No. In fact, one of the stories is that they give you this test and you find out years later it was an IQ test. And they essentially said you didn't have one, right?
Well, it's funny because it was, I laugh about it now, but it was not funny.
No.
I got taken out of my classroom along with another young lady who, like me, had just come as a refugee from Poland, and she spoke no English. We got thrown into this empty classroom. It was given 2 booklets and pencils and a clock, and somebody sort of sat over us saying things, and I never knew until I got into high school and found out through, again, life is funny. There are some people that touch your life. And Mr. Sahagan was a math teacher. And he one day pulled us out of the class and said to me and the other young lady from Poland, "What are you guys doing in this class?" And we sort of looked at each other. What do you mean?
What do you mean? Yeah.
And after digging much, he found out that we were basically placed into one of these lower learning level classes because of the tests that we had been given.
And of course, you were given a test and you didn't speak English. You didn't even know what they were asking for. And it was, completely not valid. And yet it shaped several years of your schooling.
And it shaped many people who have since suffered through that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because not everybody has a teacher that recognizes it and helps to kind of mitigate the issues and move you along.
Yeah, that was not the so much fun part of my childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's one of the things I was going to ask is I'm hoping that in today's world, things are maybe a little better for refugees when they come. I mean, I know we have English as a second language, so we understand that we need to be teaching the English language. But I'm just wondering, and I know there's bullying, and I don't even know how to stop that in any respect.
Well,
but I just wonder, I hope that we're not giving IQ tests in a foreign language to kids who are here a week.
No, I think people have become more attuned to realizing that obviously you need to be able to speak the language, but even still beyond that, there are so many cultural differences. If you come from Egypt, you come from Afghanistan, you are going to have a very different cultural mindset. And those tests were developed for America.
Exactly.
For the United States, not even for America, for the United States, not for South America. That's one thing. The other thing is ESOL was not existent at that time.
Right.
And it has been. And actually, after I retired, I did a couple of ESOL, 3 years of ESOL at the public library with adults. And I always was very much into the importance of letting people, you throw them in the water, you got to give them a paddle on a boat.
Right. Or some directions,
It has helped many people, but I have to tell you, I think I heard the news yesterday that ESOL programs have been cut out.
Oh, I hate that.
So, but I do believe there are enough human beings in the world that want to volunteer, maybe not so much in the school system, because that was the beauty of it, is that in schools, sometimes kids were really helped by the ESOL programs.
Right.
So,
yeah, that was, to me, several times during your book, I was either laughing because there were several things that were very funny. Sometimes I was almost cursing under my breath at people who were treating you poorly. And it was like, oh, so I had a big range of emotions, which was wonderful. When people put your book down, they finished reading, other than saying, wow, that was a great book, which it was, what else do you want them to get from this?
Thank you for asking this, because, when you want to summarize something, I want people to take away the fact that no matter what happens, whether you're a refugee, whether you're beat up because of an illness in your family or a product of a difficult breakup in a marriage, if you just have faith in yourself and learn to forgive, there is always hope. And I ended the book. I won't give away the ending of the book, but I was in search. I went back to Cuba to find my friend's home. And you may not always find what you think you want to find, but there's always that thread of hope. And that's really what pulled me through. It's what pulled my family through. And I think if you ask most people who have come as exiles and refugees, and I just make that distinction because we talk about immigrants. There are people who immigrate to this country, they apply, they come in under usual nice, quiet circumstances. There are people who flee because they're getting shot at or because their families are being threatened.
That's a whole different thing.
Refugees and exiles are in a different ball of wax. But there's a commonality. And when I meet people who are in similar circumstances to mine, the one thing they say is the thing that pulled them through was family and hope.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to, when they put that book down, I want them to realize that a lot of things about life are perspective. Poop happens, okay?
It
But
does.
move on. Don't
Right.
it's okay to be nostalgic, but don't let it paralyze you, because
Right.
it's so easy to get paralyzed by, oh, I wish this was this way and this was that way. And lastly, then I wrote a chapter. I wrote 2 chapters, which really crystallized for me the crux of the book. One was called Remembering to Forget, and the other one was called Remembering to Forgive.
Yeah.
And those, I go on, as you know, in those chapters and explain away. And that really helped me crystallize what got me through.
Right. Right. And I think, even if you're not someone who has lived in another country, was forced to flee, we've all been through experiences, right? And we all
Yeah.
have those things that we could let it define us in a bad way, or we can use it as kind of a stepping stool to move us forward. I was in an abusive relationship for 14 years, and I could have said, well, woe is me. I was in an abusive relationship, and not gone anywhere. Or I can say that's part of who I am, that taught me lessons. I became stronger because of, and I have figured out a way to kind of put it in a box over to the side, and it's something I can still look in and look at, but it isn't the thing that's driving me anymore. And in a lot of ways, that's what happened to you. You kind of made decisions that said, I'm here in the United States now, and I can wish and wish and wish and hope that things hadn't been this way, but it doesn't change it. And so I'm going to make the best of what I've got.
Yeah, and the thing for me that triggered it was, if you ask most people who are refugees, the families, and they will tell you, oh, we'll be okay. We'll be able to go back in a couple of years.
Right. The intention is to go back home.
And that just didn't wash after a couple of years. And then I said, you know what? I have to remember to forget. And this was one thing that I purposely did. I put my blinders on, and I sort of, for me, it became a deliberate, like when the horses in New York City, when it was blinders, because I knew where I had to go. I knew that if I didn't learn English, and if I didn't put my head to the plow and work, and I got distracted by what was happening in Cuba this day, or what was happening with the protests in Washington and all that stuff, that was not going to get me anywhere. And so I deliberately remembered to forget some of those things.
Right.
And the things that were painful, because they were of no use to me in terms of getting through. Did they hurt? Yeah. Did I have to put them away, tucked into? Yes.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, I agree. Wonderful. I'm curious. I know, so I've written a memoir, and there's more stories than you can possibly put into it. Were there any stories that you left out that you would be willing to share with us? Is there like one in particular that you kind of wish could have gotten in but didn't?
Gosh, there's so many things that happened to me in my life. There are several topics in the book that were not easy for me to write about, but I talk about cockfighting and how my family was involved, and how it was really, as a kid, I didn't think much of it, but as I got older, I thought, well, how brutal is this stuff,
Right.
There were a lot of different things that happened to me in my life. I could have put in a bunch of other things. I deliberately did not want to address political things, because the second part of the book was reflection from somebody who had an opportunity to look back, somebody who was grateful. Right. It's probably, you kind of get to a point, you can always expand the memoir and put a gazillion things.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had taken some things out which didn't really, there were things that you did as a kid, a happy birthday, that sort of thing. There were some, I had a crush on a young lady when I was a kid, and she lived down the street. And it's funny because one of my cousins who lives here in the United States called me the other day. She said, I was at a dinner back in February, and there were two other couples that were invited, and we got to talking, and one of them said his name, and he said that your father, your cousin, meaning me, had grown up with him. And she gave me his name, the first name, and she said they lived on your block, and there was only one person that was that name, and I had a crush on his sister.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, and I don't know what happened to my hormones, but when I was about 10, they started rising up, and I liked girls and stuff. But
well, so you don't feel bad, at 4 years old, I used to chase a little boy home. He would get off the school bus in front of my house for kindergarten, and I wasn't in school yet, and I would sit on the steps and wait for him, and as soon as he got off the bus, I'd chase him all the way home. So, I still know his name. Isn't that crazy, the things that stick in your head?
But, there are times, I guess, in the night, just before I can't get to sleep sometimes, that I think about things that happened and that I might want to write about. There's a part of the book, and I talk about my father. My father was a very quiet, reserved man. And lately I've been getting interested in genealogy.
Yeah.
As you get older, you start.
There is something about that, isn't there?
Yeah, but when we left Cuba, the thing that got me was when we left Cuba, we had to leave everything. Okay.
Right.
And in Cuban culture, you talk to kids. Kids talk to an adult about Mr. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, never in their first names. And nobody, my friend Juanito, I didn't even know his last name.
Right.
So my mother had told me and my grandmother about when I was a child, and that I didn't know certain grandparents who had died when I was little, etc. But I never bothered to write down their middle names, when they were born, when they died, where they died. And so that has troubled me greatly. And as I've been trying to piece this stuff together, I still have some relatives in Cuba. And the ones I have living now, I had an aunt that I remember when I was little, and I got to see her in 2016, the second time I went back. But the ones that I have left in Cuba are cousins that I actually met the two times that I went there for the first time. And I've been trying to say, can you guys, and they're reticent. When you live in a dictatorial, autocratic society, you get afraid to do certain things. So, my cousin's son, who's in his 30s, I said, can you go to the archives in the city and find out? No, I'm really hesitant because they want to know why you're looking at this stuff. And I said, well, could you maybe go to the graveyard where some of our families, and maybe write down the names of graves? And he said, yeah, that'd be great. I'll do that. And I hadn't heard from him in a while. And then he told me he has a little Vespa motorbike. I mean, the town where our families are buried are sort of about 45 minutes and can't take a bus. He has a piece missing, so he can't go anywhere. So, that's just the way life is.
Absolutely. So I'm just curious, you've done a lot of writing. This is your first actual book. And then you've also got a book of poetry, I know, that you have out. What else are you going to write? I hope you're not going to stop, because you are a good writer, and I really enjoy the writing that you do. So I'm just curious, what else do you have planned for us?
Terry, that means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that. I love to write. I don't know that I could say, when people ask me, how did you write your book? I never set out to write a book. Okay. So I have 4 grandchildren who are Energizer bunnies, and they dominate my life. Okay, I just spent 4 hours earlier today with my 6-year-old here.
And you're still awake.
Oh, he wants to build a park. So we got a mirror for a pond. We got little tree. Yes, there are 2 or 3 things. And like I said, I mull things over. There are 2 or 3 things. I want to go back and bury myself. I found a whole box of things that my mother was a writer, and she never really got a chance to in Cuba, when you were a woman, you write about women in sunflowers. Chances of being anything professional other than a housewife were not very big back when so my mom was, my grandmother was probably one of the first Cuban feminists ever, because she fought and she said, no, she is going to go to college and go to school. And she became a teacher. That was the biggest thing she could ever do as a woman.
Right.
And so, I going back to this genealogy and my roots and my city in Matanzas, I probably will write something dealing with historical fiction. Yeah. That intrigues me more so than trying to make up some character and do a novel. So that is something that I'm mulling. And I've been reading a book, which is, I recommend this to whether you came from Cuba or whether you're just a bona fide North American USA kind of person. It's a book by Ada Ferrer. It's called Cuba, a history of the United States, a history of America, Cuba. Okay. And she basically was born in Cuba, came to the United States and got her PhD and went back to Cuba and dug into a lot of archives. And she builds this incredible book. It reads like a novel. Okay. Each chapter, she's just fascinated and basically the book deals with all the stuff my family talked about, but I never really was able to put together. And in history in Cuba, in the schools, they changed history, okay?
Right. History was changed to meet whatever it was that
slavery was sweet-talked. Catholicism was really hammered down with. Even the patron saint in Cuba. And so this book has really triggered for me an interesting thing, because it talks about the history of Cuba in the context of the United States. And these 2 countries were so enmeshed. If you look up at the slavery in the United States, there were congressmen that owned plantations in Cuba because slavery had been abolished in the United States. Yeah. But they would bring slaves to Cuba, pay off priests and politicians to give them baptismal certificates so that they were born in Cuba, and then they would ship them to the States to be slaves in their plantations. This book has been just eye-opening. And so I think historical fiction is one of those things. The other thing is going back. My mom, this little book of poetry was a labor of love, because she had written a bunch of poems for children, which would be nursery rhymes, but they're not Little Mary Joe jumped over the hill. They're books about spiders and how they form their spider webs and bees and stuff like that. And so I translated those little nursery rhymes without rhyming. And then my 7-year-old, very precocious grandson, one of them, illustrated them for him.
Oh, how
I read the poems to him, and I said, Cole, here's some markers, gave him 5x7 cards. I didn't even touch up any of there were some that I put together and they have smudges, but it was just such a labor of love for me. And if my mom could I know she's somewhere has seen this.
She's somewhere and she's smiling without a doubt.
So the next thing I'm going to try to do as a side gig, if you will, she had written a bunch of fables also, and I may do something similar.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
But I'm going to have to cough up a lot of money for better markers, because
markers.
My grandson said, Poppy, those things are not good enough for me. Okay.
Oh, well, yeah, you're going to have to get some better markers for sure.
And
So
then
hey,
I'm going to keep writing
go,
on short stories and
yeah.
essays from time to time. So
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you do, because like I said, I truly enjoyed the book. Everything about the book just made me, well, not everything. Every now and then I got angry, but it was the kind of angry that is because I was involved in your story. So you did a really good job that way. Hey guys, if you want to continue this book conversation, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a print copy of the Mango Chronicle. Tell me something you liked or learned from this podcast, and you will be in the drawing. Rick, if someone wanted to reach out to you and talk with you about your books or about your experience living in Cuba, how do they reach you?
probably the best way is through my website, and I have a mail contact through that would be the
Okay.
best thing to do. And
Super.
I've really enjoyed talking with you about this, and
Oh, I'm
thank you so
glad.
much for reading my book, because I'll just say, after I put this book together, you know how hard it is to get a book
Yeah.
out and
Yeah.
everything. I have a pension. I work for the federal government and for a university for all my life. And so I don't need to make a living. Thank God I don't need to make a living by selling books, because I'd
It's
starve.
because we'd all starve to death. Yes,
So I
absolutely.
decided I would donate 2/3 of whatever royalties I make on this book to a charitable organization. And my latest leaning, and I've finally honed in on one, is World Central Kitchens, because
Fantastic.
to me, what they do is a way of paying it forward. And if we all took some lessons from that, we would be blessed.
I absolutely agree. Guys, I will have all the links in the show notes. Run right out, grab a copy, and then you know that not only are you getting a good book, but you're helping out a good cause. And Rick, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Terry. Hi, everybody, and bye, everybody. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.